Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got kind of a re-review of a knife that I really like and I feel like flies under the radar for a lot of people. This is the new Rike 1902, accompanied by my original Rike 1902. Now, these things are years apart, and I feel like the 1902 was kind of underappreciated when it first arrived a long time ago. I mean, this was given to me as a gift 5 years ago, something like that, which is, you know, that's the ancient past in knife world years. But thanks so much to Rike for sending this in. You can buy this knife right now, and the price hasn't increased that much, not nearly as much compared to some other knives over time. So, and honestly, I still think, I'm just going to say this at the beginning of the video, I think it's still a fair price. Like, I think they're doing, this is a really nice knife for what they're pricing it at. And it has a lot of elements that, you know, if you have ever looked at like custom or some of the more expensive knives and you're like, man, those are so cool. I wish I could get elements like that in less expensive knives that are still premium. In some cases you can, but I feel like it's a little bit more rare. In the case of the 1902, I think it's definitely the case. You can get a lot of really cool stuff with this knife for the amount of money that you're putting in there, which currently is $250. It used to be $200, so there's a $50 price increase over the last 5 years. I still would argue that this is a really, really good value, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Thanks so much to Rike for sending the new one in. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. I'll link this down in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex, and for the time being at least, on TikTok at _metal_complex. Quick specs. This is not going to be a typical review. This is the newer one, the one with the brighter blue and the carbon fiber. Quick specs is not going to be the same thing that we normally do. So the knife is 9 inches overall, which is amazing because this knife, when it folds up, is so compact. You're carrying so much knife. It is really just amazing. I always forget that this thing it's either 8.9 or 9 inches over. I think it's maybe 8.9. The blade length is 4 inches. Your cutting edge is 3.5 thanks to a large forward choil. There is no difference in the dimensions or anything like that when it comes to these two knives. They are exactly the same overall length, and to my knowledge, the only thing that's different between the two, maybe the jimping slightly, right? This newer one, maybe it's a little bit wider. The only thing that's really different is like the tint, or the, on some areas it's lighter or darker, right? But it's largely the same knife. Few size comparisons up against any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. Up against the 8010 and the 8020.5. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? There we go. And finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. All right. Let's weigh it real quick, and then we'll start comparing everything else side by side with the old one, and then we'll move forward. So the weight on the new guy is 4.09 ounces. Is that any different at all than the weight on the old one? No. That's close enough that I'm going to call it exactly the same. Hardware on these guys, I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. To my knowledge, they did not change the fastener heads or the fasteners on this guy. I think everything is T8, which is wonderful. Yeah, T8. T8 for the body screws. It's actually very minimal. You just have 2 on each side for this long backspacer. It's simple frame lock construction, same way on the other one, right? They're the same. Very easy to take apart. It's one of those knives that kind of looks, you know, it's deceptively simple. It looks like a knife to be like, oh, I don't know if I want to take that apart. It's just like 2 or 3 screws. You're good to go. Blade stock thickness, I don't believe they have changed that. We'll do that real quick. Can I get the flat up there? Yeah, I can. Just make sure we're zeroed out there. So we have 137 thousandths, okay? And I bet you it's the same on the old one. No, that one's coming in a little bit thinner. Did I grab that right on the flat? Let's do them again. So again, here's the old one. Okay, that's coming in at 130 thousandths. And the new one, starting from 0, is definitely coming in a little bit thicker. So it's probably 130 versus 135. So that is one of those differences there that is very difficult to see with the naked eye, but there you go. Okay. Do we need to do anything else? I don't think so. Let's talk about some of the differences here. So they chose a darker finish on the titanium frame, at least on this one. And I got to tell you, personally, I think they're both nice. I think that the titanium looks really cool and very different from what we normally see. It's one of those things about the Rike 1902. It had so many details that were different from what we normally see, especially like 4 or 5 years ago when they did this knife. Unless they did it, it's very possible this knife is older than even when I first experienced it, and I just don't know. But I remember having this knife gifted to me, and I was like, what on earth? This is wild. Holy crap. And that's when I realized Rike is a serious company. I mean, they are really doing some absolutely crazy stuff that I've never seen before. And, you go to the website and you realize this is pretty tame for Rike. But their titanium was finished different. It was contoured, right? It had some crazier inlays, just like dark blue and black carbon fiber, which I didn't see nearly as much back then. Gold anodized pivot collars that were polished. Gold hardware, polished blue backspacer, right? This really beautiful kind of vapor blasted or glass blasted blade, right? Which they still do on the new one. This has a slightly darker finish, but it's the same thing. I'd say overall the biggest differences between the two is that this guy is a little lighter. This guy's a little darker, both in blade and frame. And then the carbon fiber on this guy is more vibrant, while this is darker, which is kind of cool because the new one kind of looks like it's glowing. The blue on the backspacer, there is a red one as well, but the blue is darker on this guy, which I actually think looks a little bit better. But that is really it in terms of aesthetics. Those are the differences. It's just, I think a lot of it is going to come down to preference. I feel like the blade on the old one is a bit more vibrant, right? It's the same. It looks like it's probably the same process, but this one ended up a little more reflective, and I kind of like that. You're not seeing streaks from like a hand rub finish or anything like that. You're seeing streaks from like me wiping it off. It's otherwise very consistent, right? One is just slightly more reflective, but it's not like how Artisan Cutlery does their like sand polish, and like some of them are perfectly consistent and others like aren't. It's not like that. One is literally just slightly brighter than the other. That's preference. That's not like inconsistent. It's just, I think they intentionally decided like, let's do a dimmer finish on that one and make it look slightly darker, which I think they did a good job on. The flat here has a little more of like, I don't know, the flat on this one is very reflective, and I guess you can see less of the machininess on it, right? And this one has a little bit more of that machined imprint on it, I guess. I can't say that that's indication of like, lackluster quality control. It's just a difference in how the blade looks, right? They're both incredibly comfortable. They both have awesome ergonomics. The cutting edge is great. When it comes down to lock bar, tension, detent, and flipping action, what's the difference there? So on the old one, the detent is slightly heavier on the old one. The lock bar tension on this knife is nuts. It has, and I think partially it's because the relief cut's so small, but this has heavy lock bar tension. God. And that's probably why the detent feels lighter on this one, because this guy's been loosened up just a bit. I would say there's a 10% difference between the two here. But honestly, the flipping action feels a little better on the newer one versus the old one. The old one also feels a little tighter in the pivot, and then it has to be the case because I have definitely, as long as I've had this knife, it definitely has had longer to break in, and this new one definitely feels smoother. In fact, it is much closer to like wanting to fall shut. This one just feels really tight. So I think that was a good move there. I like that. The inlays, truthfully, on both have a couple of spots. If I was being honest, I think the inlay work on the old one is slightly better. They have a couple of goofy zones. Yeah, this one up here. It's got a little bit of a ledge right there. Not bad. This one, everything looks good until we get to right down here. There's a couple, it looks almost toothy, but I really had to look close for that. Everything else looks great. So I think maybe I just got a little bit unlucky because most of the time Rike does a great job in their fit and finish department. You know, honestly, that's pretty much it. I have to assume that Rike is hitting at least the industry standard of 59 to 61 with their M390. I didn't see it listed anywhere, but I feel like that is what we've heard in the past from Rike. Maybe it's a little bit higher. I honestly don't know. I don't use my knives hard enough to be able to determine, and I never have, and I've always made that very clear on this channel. I'm more of a design reviewer than anything else. But the Rike 1902, it remains to be one of the more flashy and detailed knives that you can get at this price point. And it's just amazing to me that you get all of this like really cool stuff, like the amazing finish. Like the finish on the blade is so beautiful. You get the contouring, you get the inlays, you get this cool like dark titanium polished hardware, you know, full titanium backspacer, you get a milled clip, you get all this awesome stuff. It's really above and beyond from what we normally see for $250, right? I always talk about how great I think Kunwu is, right about the same price point, but you know, even Kunwu's not delivering in the detail department, right? They really deliver in the performance department. They do the crazier steels, and they're getting the heat treat way up there, which a lot of people would argue is much more important. And, you know, it's very possible, again, that Rike is, like, also hitting this M390 really great. But Rike really, like, wants to give people those extra enthusiast elements. So if you are... Let's say if you're a hardcore knife enthusiast, but you're on a slight budget, but you can still justify this $200 to $300 territory, the Rike 1902 is often overlooked, and it is a super satisfying knife. Like once you get it in hand and you look at all the little details, you know, that was the big thing for me when I was gifted this knife out of nowhere. And I got it, and I was like, I've never even heard of this. Like, I mean, I've heard of Rike, but I don't think I've ever really handled anything from him. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is super nice. So I've always had like a special place in my heart for the 1902. A little bit of sentimental value there because I got gifted it, but I've spent a lot of time like looking over this model and really appreciating all the little tiny details. And I know that there are many people out there that would probably enjoy this knife that had no idea. So I would suggest you take a look at the 1902. There's also, if you go to Rike's main website, like you can get these versions, I think on the Quechua website, and you'll notice a big difference in the backspacer, right? But there's a newer version of it that's available on the Rike website as well, I believe. Or maybe it's coming soon. But either way, I'd check it out. I think the 1902 is a great model. And as long as they keep that price around $250, honestly, I think it's great. Like, I think this is a very well-priced knife. So that's going to be pretty much it today, guys. Not a typical review, but sometimes it's fun to compare, you know, newer versions of models to their past selves, I guess. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.